Hello everyone, Colin Cadet here from Woodworkweb. Today we're actually going to use some of our router skills that we've learned in our primer, and we're actually going to make some shaker doors. A little while ago I picked up this cupboard, and today we're going to make some doors for it because it came without doors. So our top measurement, this is the length of the stiles. They will be 30 inches long. The width of the doors will be a maximum of 15.5 inches. So let's go to the whiteboard now and work out our dimensions. Okay, let's work out our dimensions. Now we mentioned that the stiles, these are the stiles, are both 30 inches long. And of course all of the material is 2 inches wide. The rails and the stiles are all 2 inches by 3/4 of an inch. So we said our maximum door width was 15.5 inches. Now we also know that we have to take 2 inches off each side. Now remember, we're measuring the size of the rail. So we need to take 2 inches off here and 2 inches off here. So minus 4 inches off the maximum width brings that down to 11 inches, 11.5 inches. But we still need to add 7/16 of an inch on each side of the rail for the tongue. Here and here, here and here. So 7/16 twice is 7/8. So plus 7/8 of an inch. Now when you add these all together, it equals 12 3/8 of an inch. So that's the length of the rails. That's the rough length of the rails before we cut the tongues. And when we cut the tongues, they will slide into the grooves in the stiles so that they'll actually be exactly 15.5 inches. Okay, I've gone ahead now and cut all of the material to length. The other thing that I wanted to show is that on all of the material, I always make a mark on the back side of the material. And because I'm working with the face down all the time on the router table, every time that I know that I can see the back side, I know that I'm working on the right side. That way you don't get mixed up with your work, because if you reverse these by accident, your groove, your tongue and your groove will likely not align perfectly. So if you always work in one direction, you know everything's going to fit. Okay, today I'm working with the Freud rail and stile or tongue and groove set. And I checked these previously, and that's why I knew that the measurement of the groove to the bearing and the tongue to the bearing in both of these is 7/16, and 7/16 combined works out to be 7/8. Now the first thing we're going to be cutting is the tongue on the rails of these, and we'll show you why, and you'll see why it's important that you actually do that cut first. So let's go ahead and we'll install the tongue set in the router, and we'll start making those cuts. Okay, I've gone ahead and I've installed the bit. I've also set the height. And the height is not absolutely critical as long as you make sure that you work on the face side down all of the time with all of your pieces. The next thing I need to do is I need to isolate this bearing, and that means that when the wood goes through, the bearing, which is in the middle of the two cutters, has to be absolutely equal to the fence. So I'm just going to isolate that bearing now, make it absolutely even all the way across so that the wood flows smoothly. There. Now that's set. I'm ready to make my first cut. Okay, there we have it. We've cut the tongue on the first rail. And remember, the only part that we used, remember we talked about in the primer, the router primer, is a push block that's absolutely 90 degrees, and that's what we pushed that piece of wood through. And you'll notice on this there's actually a bit of a tongue on here, and that's because that was the alignment like that. So by actually using a piece of wood like this to push the wood through, it's not only safer, keeps this wood vertical absolutely at right angles to the bit, and it provides for less tear out in the back of the wood, and that's the whole purpose of doing that. So I'm going to go ahead now and cut all of the rails. Okay, there's all our rails, tops and bottoms, all the rails cut for all of the doors. The next thing we're going to do is install the groove cutter, and you're going to see why we've cut the tongues first, because we're actually going to use the tongue to line up the grooves. So I'm going to go ahead now and install that bit. Okay, now I've installed the bit, and I've actually even isolated the bearing. This bit also has a bearing, and it also needs to be isolated so that the wood flows smoothly and just glances off the bearing so that it cuts exactly even all the way across. So what I'm going to do now is actually test this to make sure I've got the groove in the right space as far as raising and lowering it. And I'm going to use the tongue as my guideline, and we'll see how that works. Okay, there's the first test cut, and you can see that there's quite a little lip in here, and I did that on purpose so that you can visualize that. And that means that in this case, because this was in the router like this, I actually need to lower that bit, because this little piece obviously we need to get rid of. And when the bit is perfect, there will be a slight bit of flaring on the top and on the bottom, and that tells us that that bit is perfectly aligned. So let's set that up now. Okay, there's our cut, and as you can see, there's a slight bit of flaring on each side, and that's exactly what we want. That tells us that that bit is absolutely aligned, and all we did was use a little bit of the tongue as a test. Now we're going to cut a groove in all of our rails and stiles.